Bradley from Atlanta. What do you think of Jim Ross saying Charlotte is a modern day Hulk Hogan? To me, it's stupid to compare the two inside the ring and out. Boy, people beat the piss out of JR for that one. I'm going to defend him a little bit on this. First of all, I think it was a poor analogy for him to use, and I think he invited the criticism onto himself. So, it's kind of his own fault. But I think I understand what he meant by it. I pulled the quote, and I want to read it here so everybody has context and knows what we're talking about. This is what he said about Charlotte. She is the female version of what Hulk Hogan was to WWE in the 80s. She's that strong, she's that over, that big, that impressive. So that was his quote about Charlotte. I take that to mean WWE built everything around Hulk Hogan in the 80s. They banked everything on him. If they had a men's and a women's division, he was built up as the star of the men's division. He was their poster child. He was the champion. He was the one involved in all the big feuds. He was their cash cow. Charlotte doesn't do the kind of business that Hulk Hogan did. Nobody in the company does. That would be absurd to even insinuate such a thing. You would have to be on bath salts to say something so stupid. But I think what he was getting at is that today, with the women, that role is occupied by Charlotte. With the women, every big thing has to revolve around her. Look at the WrestleMania main event. They couldn't leave well enough alone and just let it be Ronda Rousey against Becky Lynch. What did they do? Well, we have to add Charlotte. It's like WWE has all these meals that they cook. They had a great meal. They had prime rib with Becky and Charlotte. What does Vince McMahon do? Well, sprinkle in some Charlotte. But you don't need to. But, of course, in his mind, Charlotte is the premier star in the women's division, and they're going to have their first WrestleMania women's main event, probably. They're going to end the show, and you can't have a WrestleMania main event for the first time with the women unless Charlotte Flair is involved. Everything revolves around her. Who was the first person to beat Asuka? Charlotte Flair. Who was the star with the most women's title on the main roster of the current full-time performers? I'm not talking all-time. But right now, who has the most women's championships of all the women out of all the ones on the main roster? Charlotte Flair. I think she's already up to 6, 7? By the time she's done, she'll have at least 16, like her father did. They're building to that. Who's the female star they feature the most at panels and conferences and media events? Charlotte Flair. In fact, I saw that they announced the WWE panel at South by Southwest next weekend. It's about women's empowerment with Stephanie McMahon and Triple H and who else? Charlotte Flair. Not Sasha Banks. Not Becky Lynch. Not even Ronda Rousey. Charlotte Flair. So when you really think about it, she is positioned as the Hogan of the women's division. I think where JR made the mistake is by saying that she's, quote, that over. Because the minute people heard that, they were out with the pitchforks. Nobody on the current roster is over the way that Hulk Hogan was. And it might help to stop comparing everybody to the big names of the past, because the biggest names of today are not even close to being as big as the biggest names of the past. And all it does is make everybody today look so much smaller by comparison. When I poke fun of Stone Cold Becky Lynch, people say, oh, you're guilty of the same thing. All right, well, maybe sometimes I am. But when I talk about Stone Cold Becky Lynch, for example, I'm not actually trying to compare Becky to being the next Stone Cold. But they definitely are borrowing from the Austin playbook with her right now. But I think that they would all benefit, Becky included, they would all benefit from not being compared to those guys because it doesn't help their cause.